Oh, hold on. Yeah, yeah, sorry about that. Had to troubleshoot some things. Yeah, sorry.
from Philadelphia, from Malaysia, Indonesia. Let us know where we are, where you are from. He's having some issues on the sound, but I think it's just a matter of time. We were a bit silent early just now, just a 20-second lag. All right.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening in, we are talking about the Solana ecosystem this time around. We've done this 14 times. Kind of fast how we've started doing this virtual meetup at the start of the COVID pandemic last year. I mean, this COVID thing, we thought it was going to last like a couple of months. Seems like it's going to be a couple of years, and doesn't seem like it's ending soon. I mean, I'm in Malaysia right now, and it's kind of locked down over here. I think Singapore, Ming, you're in Singapore as well, and I think it's kind of a lockdown in Singapore as well. I think Europe and US kind of a better situation right now, but yeah, I don't know how long this will last. For those of you who are listening, we have 3 different guests today: Anatoly, founder and CEO at Solana; Ming, co-lead at Mercurial Finance; George, Harrap, co-founder at Step Finance. And we're talking about exploring the Solana ecosystem. And right after this call, we have DJ After Party in collaboration with DAO Records. We have DJ Savage, Crypto Buffalo, Perpetuariat, Category 5. So feel free to stay on and listen to some cool DJ vibes right after this panel session. Yeah. Okay, I think everything is good on the podcast. So I guess on the meetup on Crowdcast. So I guess we can start, guys. It's like 3 minutes past. Welcome to the 14th CoinGecko meetup, guys. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having us. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome to be here.
Yeah, I guess for the first question, right, I have this question for Ming and Josh. Like, why do you guys choose to build on Solana instead of Polygon, BSC? What advantages do you see in Solana compared to the rest?
Go for it, Ming.
Okay, so I think there are 3 reasons, right? I think first of all, I think we actually so our team is very technical, right? And we actually went to research all the different like chains and tech stacks, and then we think that Solana is one of the chains, right, that really takes a very distinguished approach to scalability and building, right? And you don't really see that with other chains. And I think when a chain really commits to a new infrastructure, right, from ground up. From start to the end, right? I think this also means that there's a lot more technical possibilities, right? If you contrast it with other chains like say BSC or Polygon, the issue is that it's actually the good thing is that it's easy to onboard, right? But there's also no real technical innovation, right? And also like no real infra being built. And I think so. One of the things that our team was very attracted to was the possibility of really kind of like exploring this new tech stack. Right. Yeah. So that's one thing. I think so I know for a lot of people it's a turn off. For our team's a turn on. Right. We kind of say, hey, how do we? Wow, it's so amazing. It's like we have a chance to be part of this new ecosystem. The design patterns are completely new. How you run programs are completely new. How you write contracts are completely new. Right. So given this very different kind of like infra, what can we do? Right. So I must admit that was actually one of the things that attracted us. Right. I think related to that is also so in blockchains, right? One of the most important things is design patterns, right? For example, how do you ensure security, right? What's the best practices to use, like token approvals and revocation, and all that kind of stuff, right? And then obviously on Ethereum, these things have been fairly developed, right? But on Solana, it's actually quite new. So again, it's actually so actually our team, we have a lot of open source guys, right? For example, Xiong, one of our co-founder, he's one of the core contributors to Ruby on Rails, right? And another our team, our PA, he has been part of the Solana ecosystem from day one, right? So I think we are all excited to kind of like engage in like this process, of evolving kind of like these key design patterns, right? That the whole space can kind of like work with. Yeah, so we are excited about that. And thirdly is, obviously ecosystem, right? So so one of the things that, going into a space as a developer is different from investor, right? Investor, you go in there, put money, you pop out, right? It doesn't matter. But as a developer, it's very, very different, especially if you put your face behind it, right? You are literally saying, hey, I'm going to commit to this thing, right, for a few years, right? So it becomes a matter of going like, hey, what ecosystem is there a long-term ecosystem here, right? Is there an ecosystem that the community is unique, that the developers are going to stick around, right? And I think that those are things that we saw in Solana, right? Because number one, for for example, we saw the community was actually amazing, right? You do not see the community in BSC, right? It's a very unique and community that came to Solana and actually had really wanted to be here, right? And same thing with developers too, right? It's like I mean, once they get good at Solana, they're gonna stay there. They're not going anywhere, right? Yeah. So that's it. So I think so summarizing, I think we were excited about the unique tech infra. We want to be part of early building the design patterns from day one. And thirdly is that we saw a very strong potential for long-term community, developer base, and investor base. Yeah. So those are three things.
What about you, Josh?
Awesome.
What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, so we started our journey in Solana actually from a hackathon. And prior to that hackathon, we were looking at building a DCA contract. And we used Polygon, then Matic and XDAI as well. You know, that's where we built out an MVP. But the problem was like, it just wasn't suitable for what we're trying to do. Literally didn't work. The reason for that is that it was way too expensive. And also lacked liquidity as well. So on some of these side chains like Polygon, sure, like now they're doing fairly well and they have some AMMs and stuff, but they don't really have everything that you need. There's not every single Ethereum DeFi token that's on there, right? And even if there is, there's maybe limited liquidity. So if you're building a DCA contract where, like, let's say you have a bunch of people which want to go and buy like one CRV every day or something, you really do need that liquidity there. You need the ability to execute those transactions and do it atomically and you know, not have to swap back and forth between the Ethereum main chain and anything else. So anyway, you know, we built it out. We found out that, yeah, look, the liquidity wasn't there. And we thought, okay, wow, maybe that's why a DCA contract doesn't really exist in Ethereum at the moment. But then we saw Solana and we saw, hey, actually, all of the Ethereum DeFi coins are already on Solana. That's number one. And number two, the market maker for them is the largest crypto fund in the world with Alameda. So like there's plenty of liquidity there, right? So that's what sort of got us interested. And then we started looking at Solana and we're like, hey, actually you could build a DCA contract, you know, on Solana, you know, quite reasonably, much cheaper. And it also affects the profit margins as well of the contract, like a lot. So yeah, you know, we got started in that journey, yeah, you know, through the hackathon, we sort of found out that you know, perhaps the best path forward is to be this like connector place. So it's not just a DCA contract, it's not just a vault, it's not just a yield farm. It's like, you know, let's just focus on being that place that people come to, because Solana didn't have that. And Solana ecosystem is still growing, you know, right now. You know, there's lots of new things popping up. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, right? And for us, I think that this is part of, you know, something that can grow, and you're getting in at the base level, you know, which is great. So yeah, you know, we just want to be like one of those core, you know, infrastructures which people use every day, you know, just like your MetaMask or something like that, right? It's just something that you always use and you always have a tab open doing it, like a CoinGecko.
That's great to hear, guys. Yeah, I think both of you offer some really interesting perspective on why Solana makes sense. It's interesting to hear from your point of view on the reason. I think, Ming, you brought up an interesting point about BSC just now on there's no real developer community in BSC. Last month, 2 months ago, we organized a meetup on BSC, and I was trying really hard to find developers or team members to come on stage. Real team members, not anonymous guys. And gosh, that was one really hard task to do. I couldn't really find. Everyone was anonymous. I don't know why they chose to be anonymous, but it was hard to find people. Yeah.
Just real quick on what Josh was saying, right? It's like it's actually a lot more. So everything looks gravy at the start when you start a new chain. It's very simple, right? Because end of the day, it's just a bunch of nodes running. But then, for example, to run an L2 on Ethereum, the yearly cost will be anywhere from 50 to 100 million. You know, just to sync out the main chain itself, right? The other big thing is that like a lot of things look scalable when they're small, right? But then when the different scale when they're big, right? So I think I think having an extremely technically competent team as to form the core that L1 is actually very, very important as well. Yeah.
So I mean, because Solana is so scalable, right? Like, what do you think is going to be driving demand and use cases for Solana at this point in time? Both of you, George and Ming, you guys kind of in DeFi environment, but really, I think Solana is kind of quite capable to host NFT games and any other thing. Where do you see the demand? Maybe this is for Anatoly, but like feel free to chip in for the rest. Where do you guys see the demand for Solana is the use case of Solana is going to be in the next few years?
I guess like one thought that I've kind of had a realization is that a lot of what we do touches finance, right? When I go to a website and I'm served an ad, there's a 0.2 cents that the advertiser gets, right? The Google gets some fraction of that. And that's effectively like a microtransaction. It's the smallest unit of currency on the internet right now. And it feels like there's a way to disrupt a lot of these applications that are monetizing themselves on the internet using blockchain, using governance tokens, using community building. Like everything is finance at the end of the day. Like look at Axie. Is Axie a game or is it a universal? Like is it a new way to do like a UBI? Right? Like it's I think I think like what's interesting about DeFi is this really massive global like super connected network that allows all of a sudden 100 million people to all participate in finance directly without any intermediary that's coordinating it. And like that is so powerful that like let's just go, let's just let's just build that as fast as we can and then see where that stuff disrupts kind of all these other use cases, like I think all those other use cases can be peripheral to it, and it doesn't mean that they're going to be small in any sense, like disrupting Google and Facebook by building a social network with no ad revenue, I think is a really like a pretty huge thing, right? Those are $2 trillion companies.
Yeah, I think microtransactions are really interesting, but it's just impossible to get any of these microtransactions done on the traditional payment rails. Not really feasible on Ethereum either because of the high gas fees. But it'd be interesting to see how some of these applications come up and get your money streamed. And I guess Ethereum can when you get a claim, but not so small transactions, I suppose. Got to be slightly bigger. But yeah,
like Cope is a social network, right? Like 100%. Like what else is it, right? Like, and it's an awesome community. There's like culture to it, and people are building stuff. It's 100% a social network, but it can also be used as collateral, right? In DeFi, which is wild. Like think about that.
So actually, just to jump into what Anatoly is saying, right? I think one of the awesome things that we are really seeing is take up of like non-investment stuff, right? Like for example, early on in Ethereum, all you had was shitcoins, right? Shitcoin trading, that's all you had, right? But what's very, very, very interesting, right? And I know we are doing mostly like hardcore DeFi stuff. But what's really interesting to me, right, is that you see all these they're not really using DeFi, but as Anatoly said, right, it's like when you have a token in there, right, it drives a lot of incentives and possibilities, right? And I think that we see all this like code, like gaming, we see like borrowing protocol, we see all these things that they don't really need the blockchain in their core operation, right? But they need a certain like currency, right? And they need a lot of like frequent transactions, right, in that thing. And that's actually super exciting for me because it shows the potential to not think of blockchain apps as a single type of thing, but more like, okay, how can blockchain be inserted as a financial backend, right, into many of these different services, right? And I think that that's actually one thing that really excites me. And again, I think what is interesting about Solana is that it cuts out the community, right? Part of it is the scalability and everything and stuff, but the really important thing that people don't quite see it, right, unless you're really in it, is the community. Because without a community that's willing to try things out, right? Think about it. You can build a new VPN on BSC, but who will use it, right? Right? But I think that it's the ability to kind of have a community that's willing to try stuff. And secondly, is the ability to create a currency that serves as incentives. And thirdly, and thirdly, kind of obviously having the investor community, right, that will support this kind of endeavors, right? Yeah. As a quick point to that is that, for example, we did a DevNet thing about 1 month ago, and then I'm telling you, it's amazing. It's like we're hundreds of reviews coming in, like very useful. It's just you never get the engagement anywhere, right? And I think that's actually the one thing that unless you are in Solana, you wouldn't really get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also there's for us, there's like two areas. It's refinement and then potential new things that we don't know. So the thing is, you don't know what you don't know, right? So there might be new applications which come up, which nobody's even thought of or considered, but because you can do it cost efficiently, now it can work. Like the DCA example is one good one, right? Literally doesn't work on Ethereum, too expensive and slow. You know, this is a new business model that could perhaps exist on another chain like Solana. But then also the refinement, like where I've onboarded a few people into the Ethereum DeFi yield farming, landscape over the last, I guess, couple of months to at least, show them how it works. And it's like, they just have like $20 and they want to go and stake that somewhere and they want to go and earn a yield. Forget it. Like, it's so hard. Like, oh, your transaction failed for the third time and you just had to pay like $60 to try and transfer your $20. And oh yeah, by the way, like the staking, yeah, that's even more gas inefficient. So it's like all of these problems don't really exist on Solana because everything's so cheap and fast. Like, so I think that as a new onboarding mechanism, people that are new to the crypto space, like they're not going to be sending, paying $60 per transaction or something and like having a bunch of failed transactions in their MetaMask and trying to figure out, what the hell's going on. So I think it's much easier to just say, look, hey, if you try a transaction, it doesn't work, it didn't cost you everything. You can just try it again and it'll work. And so Solana is, I think, really good for that. And it's a good gateway for new people. And we've seen a bunch of new people which have never actually used any of the Ethereum DeFi apps, actually. They come to the Discord and they're like, is this kind of like Pancake or something? Or it's like usually you go, is it like Uniswap or is it like Sushi or something, right? But actually there's a lot of people who never used Ethereum, probably never will. Why would you? If you're brand new to it and then someone says, oh yeah, there's this expensive slow thing over there, do you want to use it? They'd be like, why?
Actually,
you know,
yeah, I mean, so just want to chime in real quick is that, I mean, you have other blockchains that are very cheap like BSC, and that's the reason why they're good for early people coming. But I think I think this whole BSC versus Solana thing is very important in the sense that we didn't feel confident that that BSC has a very robust long-term future, right? So I think you have, again, it's very easy to create a new blockchain, right? Just spin a Tendermint, Cosmos, and you're done, right? I'm a blockchain. But it's not just about how cheap something is, transaction and stuff, but also kind of like whether there's a long-term foundation, right? So I think what's important here is that for Solana, right, is that as Josh said, the low cost is very important, but it's not just about low cost at the start; it's a low cost long term, right? Yeah, so I think that was, and I think that we had confidence that the Solana ecosystem and the team will be able to kind of maintain this scalable infrastructure even when it scales.
Yeah, I think Josh, you brought an interesting point, and it's something that the Aave guys was telling us during the last meetup and when we had a Polygon meetup, in the sense that the low cost has kind of unlocked a whole new group of users who would not have used blockchain otherwise. So the Aave guys found that those Aave is deployed on Ethereum and on Polygon, and what they found was that a lot of the users on Polygon were never users on Ethereum at all. So there were very little addresses that were using Aave on, that were the same addresses that were using on Ethereum and Polygon. So whenever we kind of make things, because that, if you think like Anatoly was saying, if you think about like the total addressable market, the TAMs for blockchains are huge. Like basically anyone and everyone in the world, and right now it's just 1% or 0.1% of the people using it. So as we make things cheaper and more people use it, there will be groups of people who have never used blockchains ever, and they'll come into Solana at some point and bump into it. So that's an interesting point of view, I suppose. I think one of the big drivers as well, Anatoly, was you guys got Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX to come fully on board and embracing the Solana ecosystem. I'm curious to hear from your point of view, from your story, like who convinced who to kind of partner with each other? Did you kind of convince Sam and FTX to kind of work together with Solana, or was it the other way around? Sam kind of like, Solana is going to work with FTX and got to do this thing.
It was fairly mutual, like, and when we started talking to them, they were a much smaller exchange. A year and a half ago, like, I don't know if you guys remember, FTX, everybody knew about them, but it wasn't like in the top 5. It was like this kind of gritty, like traders only, the like prepare to be liquidated kind of place. I ended up getting connected to Sam through one of our common investors, and I gave him this vision, like, look, we can make this thing scalable to billions of users because we're really betting on Moore's law. That's something that has been like, working for like, for the last 40 years and doesn't seem like it's going to stop in the near future. And we can leverage that. We can leverage this like massive industry to make this technology accessible to everybody in the world. And that was like something that really lit them up in the kind of things that they wanted to build. Internally, they have been like talking about like, let's build the best DEX in the world for like forever, right? As soon as they launch FTX, they're like, we want to build like the decentralized version of this, but nothing was really suitable for it. So when we showed them our like break demo and like showed them like, look, you can spam the network, but like just as fast as I'm hitting keys, you can actually fire smart contract transactions. It kind of like clicked for all their engineers that this is now possible, and that's what got them really excited. And like partly too that the engineering culture at like exchanges or like traditional finance, like high frequency traders, is I think quite different from like Solidity devs. It's much more like you got to use C++, you got to know where your memory is, you got to like understand how those bits flow. And we basically bonded like instantly with them because this is how we think. Like there was a lot of kind of common ground between us.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you guys got FTX, and FTX kind of served as one of the centralized bridge or one of the best ways to kind of move your funds from Ethereum or from exchange to Solana. Like, I mean, if you want to move, you want to get a USDC or USDT on Solana. I mean, a lot of people kind of use FTX to kind of bridge port over. But I'm curious to hear, right? I mean, we were talking about bridges before before we went live. Like, what are the other ways to kind of bridge your assets over to Solana if you don't want to use a centralized exchange like FTX? Are there any decentralized bridges, and are there plans to build more in the future?
So Ren is another one, and there's another active bridge called Wormhole that does cover Ethereum. So the FTX pair, the pairs that are on Serum right now are based on the assets that were bridged by FTX, which is where Alameda is providing liquidity. So, what kind of needs to happen is for like there's a next version of Wormhole that's coming out that's going to support like arbitrary messages, include like basically NFTs and like whatever other contracts that we need to kind of pair between them. And the Serum folks, Alameda and the market makers need to switch over to those pairs. And it'll happen like sooner or later. It's just kind of a matter of time. I kind of think of bridges as decentralized custody solutions. Like it's effectively like when I hold USDC, right? The real money's in a bank that Circle manages. So they're effectively the custodian, and that's a centralized custodian that's issued these things, right? When I hold Wrap BTC or RAN BTC, there's some other party that does custody, right? When you treat even like a fully bidirectional IBC-based bridge, there's a set of validators that are running those Litecoin proofs that are effectively acting as decentralized custody for any assets that are pegged through that for those contracts. And that's kind of a very pretty simple way to think about it, because it really eliminates this like, I don't know, like belief that there's some way to kind of get around this. Like there isn't like a bridge that removes this idea that there's a custodian at the end of the day who has the real underlying asset from the thing that's pegged over, right? When you actually like accept that as the truth, you're like, okay, what are my risks? What are my settlement risks, right? Like this is what I'm dealing with. And then you can start comparing apples to apples. Like is FTX like a settlement risk now? Is REN a settlement risk? It's newer technology, right? So like maybe slightly different, right? Like you're now thinking about like new tech that's more decentralized versus like super secure centralized exchange of doing this, right? Like so you can now start comparing like what do I need? Maybe I want a piece of both, right? And kind of hedge my bets. and then it's just kind of traders are really used to dealing with like settlement risk issues. So it kind of makes it more like fungible, right? In a way.
I think the thing with bridges as well to keep in mind is a lot of people think that, oh, if there's a bridge, that means that my coins will just transfer across and it'll all work. But the problem is that like you can have like a BTC on Solana, and like BTC is BTC, right? So you have to have a wrapped BTC. And as Anatoly said, like somebody's got to custody that. But also, like once you have your wrapped BTC, like, well, okay, where's the liquidity for it? Like, how can you trade it? Like, can I get a price for it? Is it the same price as a real Bitcoin? And who's going to be like doing that? So like that's one thing that I think a lot of bridges might or have struggled with is like getting initial liquidity for their wrapped coins, because certainly like I've seen that you know, in the past where it's like, cool, I have a wrapped version of a coin. It's not worth anything because there's no market for it on this particular chain and no one's willing to trade it. So it's kind of like you need you need two elements there. You know, you need Alameda as well as, or you know, a market maker. It's good that they're on Solana, but yeah, you need somebody to provide or you know, have interest in market making a lot of those pairs to actually make them liquid, and then they're way more useful than they would be otherwise.
So to jump on to what Josh is saying, right? 100% with 100% agree with what everyone's saying. I think Anatoly made a very, very, very good point, right? That is not commonly understood. The best way to think of a bridging is not transferring assets, right? But custody, right? That's something that actually really that people don't understand, because when you bridge something over from say Ethereum, right? The bridge is in essence the custodian of your asset, right? And most people think of it transferring assets. It's not that way. Yeah. But a few points here. Number one is that actually I was on the founding team of WBTC, right? So I started the idea with Loy at Kyber, right? So one of the things that we really looked into was that we compare all the different mechanisms, right? You know, and then we ended up and we realized that like the best mechanism was actually one where we worked with an extremely trusted centralized custodian, right? i.e. BitGo, right? So we worked with BitGo to kind of like custody the chain. And then yes, it's centralized, but it was extremely transparent, right? Any given moment, you always knew that for every WBTC, you have one BTC in the vault, right? And that mechanism, even though it's centralized, right, it proved to be work much better, right, than any of the complicated collateralized, over collateralized frameworks out there. So I think it's not so much that decentralized is always better, right? But there are different trade-offs, right? And I think that it's the same thing on Solana right now, right? There's a FTX bridged Bitcoin, and there is going to be run BTC, right? It's not necessarily one's better than the other, right? But it's actually good to have a range of bridges, right? That have different things. That way, if one thing breaks, the other things are still there, right? So I think that's the one thing that we have to understand. The second thing is what Josh is saying, and it's actually very important. Is that when you bridge something over, you need liquidity, right? And for us, I think obviously we do stable swaps, right? That's one of our main thing. So and our view is that there's going to be a gazillion bridges, right? You have Soul Bridge, you have Run Bridge, you have Wormhole Bridge and stuff. So the question is, how do you build up a scalable infrastructure, right, for this liquidity, right? You know, and so that's one of our key focus. We will definitely aim to kind of like provide very good liquidity for any wrap assets that come over. Yeah, and the third thing to point out here is that like the more bridges, the more fragmentation too, right? Because when say so for example, now we have when Solana first started, we have FTX Bitcoin, and we have Run Bitcoin, and then we are going to have Soul Bridge Bitcoin, and we're going to have and then very soon we're going to have WW Bitcoin BTC, right? You know. So I think, but it's exciting. I think if Solana is going to be the settlement layer, right, for finance, then I think that we definitely need to prepare for a future where we have a lot of versions of the same coin, right? And it's also, but one thing is the counterpart of liquidity is risk, right? Because the more you pull liquidity together, right, the more it's more liquid, but there's more risk, right? So I think how do we solve the problem? Have one big pool that puts everything together, but the risk is together as well. What that means is that like if one coin fails, for example, if one bridge gets compromised, then everything dies. So I think one thing that I think people don't understand right now in terms of bridging is that they think bridging is just transferring. No, it's not. Bridging is actually one of the biggest systemic potential dangers to our space today, right? I'm not kidding, right? It's like I think we have to understand that. Yeah, so I think that is a topic that I think I actually dealt a lot with, and yeah, I started to
what do you think we'll need to do to kind of improve transparency? I mean, bridges kind of hold custody of funds, right? You kind of send funds onto one smart contract on Ethereum, and then the other side on Solana releases the funds, and then somebody sends on Solana, it holds on custody, and then releases funds on Ethereum, for example. What do you think needs to be done to improve transparency on like Wormhole or any other bridges like Rand Bridge or other bridges? Like nobody's really asking or questioning these things at this point in time, at least.
People used to like back in the day, like there used to be proof of reserves, and they used to be a thing, and exchanges would like compete to like provide their proof of reserves hash table of all of the balances, and then you can check it on chain and that sort of stuff. But I guess I don't know if exchanges found it too hard to keep up, or they didn't bother, or people didn't care, or something like that, right? But I think like that's the best way, right? So a lot of these bridges, it's like, look, Bitcoin is a thing. You can prove that Bitcoin exists. Just show us the address, like show us the list of addresses, like show us the, show us something, right? And that could be its own transparency page. And it's literally, that's its job. It just shows you, hey, we have minted like X amount of bridge coin, and we can prove that we have exactly that much in a contract on another chain right here. Here's the transaction ID. Here's the address. Boom. Everything's great. I think that's probably the best way that you could do it. Other ways are kind of, involving trust and these sorts of things. But yeah, for a lot of these bridges, like, I don't think that's really too necessary, because at the end of the day, like, they're all coins. So you should be able to trace the coins back to the source somewhere.
And do you think like having Ming, you brought up some interesting points about liquidity and all for these bridges. Like, I think Solana is one of those chains that are interesting, where you have like professional traders, market makers like Jump Trading and Alameda being actively involved in market making all this markets. Do you think that's kind of a big, is it very important? Is it a big differentiating factor for Solana compared to like say Polygon or BSC, in your opinion?
Oh, it's a. I mean, liquidity is such a huge topic, right? So I think that there are two types. I think the market makers, professional market makers, they're extremely good at either extremely high volatility things, right? Or high volume things, right? There's actually a lot of things that they won't touch, right? For example, I don't think market makers are particularly, for example, if a new bridge comes up, right, like Wormhole Bridge or Ren Bridge, BTC, I don't think that it's so inclined to touch it, right? I think the ones that will provide liquidity for that segment will be users, right? Users who use something and they want to earn you, right? So they do AMMs. So they create so essentially they use something like Mercurial or other platforms to provide liquidity, for that pool. This is actually has to do the broader topic here is actually around like actually, for example, even AMMs, right? There are a lot of coins that market makers will never touch, but it's so easy for the protocol, for the team itself, or for users to create a liquidity pool for it, right? So we think for us it's the same thing too, right? I think our goal is to kind of like provide the infrastructure for any user to easily come in here at liquidity. And where market makers will come in is that when there's a big enough spread, right? For example, if they can actually get say Ren BTC for like 1% off, right? And they have and on the back end they already have a mechanism to actually translate the Ren BTC to BTC, right? So they will just do that. They will just do arbitrage. So basically, I think all these market makers on Solana is actually a massive, because they will ensure that when the spread becomes big enough, it always recovers, right? Mm-hmm. But you can't rely on them to provide the initial liquidity. That's not their job, right? Yeah. So the initial liquidity will always be provided by the users in the form of AMMs. Yeah, for any new coin, whether it's a new coin or new coin or anything. Yeah. Hey, by the way, I just want to do a big shout out here. So Skynet actually said something really funny. He said BSC and Matic bridges are effectively centralized exchanges under the hood, right? And I think that that is actually accurate. Yeah. So I think it's funny.
Yeah, it's interesting the comment from Skynet. I think talking about the Q&A and comments in the chat box, I think there were some questions about NFTs on Solana. What do you guys think about NFTs? Like, do you guys think that's going to be a thing on Solana as well, or not really at this point in time?
It's totally going to be a thing.
Yeah, like Metaplex feels like it's blowing up, right? Like there's a bunch of homegrown artists and some like real AP coming along to use it. So uh, it's so that was built by like incubated with like our internal team, and they went from nothing, literally nothing, to full auction mechanics with like master records and all this other stuff, plus payment rails like in 8 weeks. So that was like to me like the real like sign that we have done like the right things. Like we've focused on the right things in terms of like what tools the developers need and what do they need to like actually build the product. Was how fast they're able to go from literally knowing nothing about the chain and like knowing nothing about how to develop anything on Solana to like a full-on fledged product. So that was to me like pretty awesome. I hope to see more of those like really like break out like let's build like gaming platform or whatever.
I think gaming's probably where it's going to head, right? So like at Step, I think we have the largest coverage of NFTs. We have a thing called an NFT gallery. And we have like all of these different supported projects there, including some of the AR ones as well from Star Atlas. And I think that's a cool example of like, if you can tokenize like in-game assets, like Star Atlas, let's say it's a game like EVE Online, right? Where you have spaceships and you go and invade like other civilizations and stuff. What you could do is like tokenize a planet, sell it as an NFT, short it, get your guild together, go and raid the planet, smash it up, and then you've just shorted it so you can actually make some real world money in it. And it's all happens on the DEX. And then you can, buy it back for less over time. So like you could be basically a real world pirate, but in the metaverse, which I think would just be badass, right? Like that'd be so cool. So I think there's going to be lots of those things which are going to pop up. Like I think gaming is probably the gateway, right? Like we spoke a little bit about Axie before, but I think it's kind of shown the way that this kind of stuff is possible. But in order to do it, like, people that have used OpenSea's hard. Like, I don't know how like new people to crypto, like try and, get into OpenSea. It must be really painful because, you have the concept of, approving transactions and, of wallets, which are kind of funky and everything costs, it's expensive and slow. It's not instant as well. So like, I think Solana, like that's not a problem, not really any of that. Right. So I think Solana is, really poised to just make NFT, the whole experience behind that just way better. And also because you have like a DEX at the heart of the entire blockchain, like you can put these NFTs or, I guess it would be, some of the ones which are duplicates or fractionalized. Like you could make markets for them, like on a DEX, and like everyone's on the same DEX, right? It's not like, oh, we're in this L2 and these other guys are in that L2, and like they don't talk to each other, and we need proxy tokens to do it on Ethereum and blah blah blah. So yeah, I think everything just on the same level is just a way better system, and yeah, it's definitely going to be the future, I reckon.
Yeah, I think we spoke briefly about Axie Infinity. What they have achieved this year was nothing short of spectacular. I used to think that the future is kind of dystopian. We have like large tech companies going to have to pay the government lots of money to kind of, and then to have UBI, universal basic income, to kind of keep the population at bay, to not go crazy and run amok. But it almost seems that Axie Infinity is kind of showing the way. There may be an alternative to UBI, like where people can get paid to play games. And actually, it's interesting that Axie, you can earn for many of these countries, like in Philippines, for example, like that's actually a decent job. Like it's higher than the minimum wage. You get paid more than working McDonald's or driving a Grab or Uber, for example, in Philippines. So it's interesting, and I think it's just a matter of time before play to earn kind of take off and more places. And for many of these players, they are interacting with the blockchain without even realizing that they are interacting with the blockchain. They don't even know that there's kind of tokens at the back end. So it really doesn't matter whether Axie Infinity is run on Ethereum or Ronin or Solana, and it's the same for any other game developers, I suppose.
So a few things here, right? I think what you're saying is actually really important, right? It's like farming in-game gold, like World of Warcraft and everything, has always been a thing. But the big difference here is that with cryptocurrency, right, and with DEXs, everything is liquid, right? it literally doesn't matter, right? Money is money, right? So once there's a way for an item to have value and have market value and be translated to any of the major currencies, right? That's it. They have it, right? You have immediately you have linked up in-game currency into the whole world, right? And I think that potential is amazing. That's what I said. I think, and there's one reason why I'm bullish that Solana is going to be a big part of that. It's because I think Solanians they love games. They just have this like crazy they just crazy inclination, right? We launched day one our own like Mercurial NFT. Man, people went crazy, right? And like wow, and it's actually really important because that gave us the incentive, right, to make more NFTs, right? And that also gave us an incentive to kind of like create more and more NFTs and systems for the games. Yeah, so I think and yeah, I think the last thing here is that like it's also really interesting in the sense that you don't know blockchain, right? If you're a game developer, right? I think we'll get to the point whereby libraries are abstracted enough such that like you as a game developer can easily kind of create like currencies in game without knowing anything of blockchain. I think when that happens, that is actually when you start to take off. Because very soon, developers themselves, right, might not even know how to use blockchain. They just integrate the library and they're done, right? I think that is the future we're working towards, I think.
Yeah, I think eventually everything will be kind of in SDKs and developers to kind of just read these docs and then everything's going to be abstracted away. Just call this function and you create a token and you don't really need to know all this like nitty gritty of all the blockchain stuff. So it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and that's when I think things will really take off. Yeah.
Ming, let's talk a little bit about some of the recent partnerships that you guys have. Mercurial recently partnered with Terra to put up a joint LM liquidity mining collaboration. What is it about, and what does it mean for Mercurial? Why Terra? Why UST? I suppose as well.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for asking. So basically we collaborated the Terra team to put up a co-LM proposal to the community, right? Yeah, essentially the whole point here is to obviously it's very simple to set up a new pool and everything, but I think that it is something special to kind of like invite the community, right, to do this together, right? So essentially what the proposal is that okay, so there are three things we want to kind of like work together on, right? The first thing is first thing is liquidity, right? You know, how do you incentivize and bring more UST onto Solana, right? And have UST be one of the currencies on Solana easily used, right? The second thing is education. How do we, because one of the things that's very, very important about stablecoins is that they all work very, very different, right? And I think that what's actually very important for people is that they understand how the money gets generated, right? So I think we look at education as well, you know, for UST. And thirdly, it's about adoption, right? Is that and for the fact we would like to have UST be used in more lending protocols and lending apps and things like that. Yeah, so that is the collaboration to kind of drive liquidity, education, and adoption, right? Yeah. So that's the main thing. And I think that the benefit, I think the key benefit here is that Terra, besides Solana, right? And honestly, in crypto we talk about community a lot, right? But there really aren't that many active communities around, right? I think Ethereum is obviously one, Solana is another one, but Terra is another one, right? So we saw that. So the reason why we went through the effort to kind of like work with them on this is because we think that there's a big opportunity here, right, to get the community engaged, right, and interested in Solana, right, and I think we did that pretty well. You know, I think it definitely. I think so far, I think there's a lot of discussion, both among the Terra team and Terra community on what we can do with Solana, right? You know, yeah. So I think so that was the motivation because we felt like if we can get this community involved in Solana community, we think there's a lot of synergy both ways. We can create a lot of we can create a lot more liquidity and usage for their token, for their coin, and at the same time, you know, and now a whole new community will get to be interested in the download Solana wallets. They'll start farming on Solana. They'll do all these things. Yeah. So and obviously for Mercurial is great too, right? Because you know we hopefully through this collaboration and through this think we will add value to both the Terra community and the Solana community, right? I mean, yeah, and again, it will be very easy for us to create a new pool and just go there. But then we felt it was important to do it in a more community way. Yeah, so that is why the collaboration exists.
Curious to hear from all three of you, right? what kind of metrics do you guys use internally, and how do you define success? Like, what kind of things must go to the top right to know that you guys are on the right track?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can start on that. I think for us, one of the core things, I mentioned earlier, we came out of the hackathon, we initially were just like a DCA contract, but then we sort of thought that, you have to be this place that attracts attention. And that has to be the place that people want to go every day. They have the tab open, it's that place that people always go. I think that's immensely valuable. So yeah, I mean, for us, it's probably daily active users. It's wallets interacting with Step, doing whatever it is that they're doing. It could be swaps, it could be, NFT stuff, it could be, a bunch of other things. But yeah, I think for us, it's kind of like, number one, are we getting the users in and are we keeping their attention? And number two, like, okay, that's good, but the whole point of that is you convert them to do something, right? So I think for us as well, conversions is another way. And certainly, if you have all of the users in one place that are always looking at your website every day, then you can direct them to do different stuff that might add value to the rest of your project, right? So that's sort of our focus at the moment, is just focusing on those attention metrics essentially.
For us, there's like kind of like two things that we are really striving for. One is this like censorship resistance piece, which is, it's almost like a public good, because it's not like a thing that could ever be profitable, I think, like it's like hard to define it. Like, we have to build this thing, we have to make it super censorship resistant, because it's necessary for like all these other things to be built on top of it, and we're kind of doing it as a religion almost, and that part, like a lot of like our validators, like everyone else that's actually building the network in the trenches, this is something that a lot of folks are working on in the community. And like, that's been kind of an awesome glue, because we got people that are willing to, drive out to a data center in the middle of the night and fix your RPC server, right, if you need it. The other side of it is the number of teams that are like launching, like with funding, like people that have like runway to go execute on like their vision, because of exactly what George said. Their metrics are now daily active users, and I strongly believe that if we have the censorship resistant network and we figure out a way to get 1 billion users with self custody, or like, 1 billion is the dream, but like let's get to 100 million, like all of that massive people on the censorship resistant platform, then I think like the kinds of applications you'll see succeed there are going to be these like next generation, very disruptive to like Facebook, to Google, to the like the banking system kind of applications that really super connect everyone. So that those are like the two main drivers. Like right now, like crypto's so early, there's no way for like any one of us to really have a sales team that like goes to like the banks and says we'll sell you DeFi or something like that, right? Like it's still very much like scrappy startup. We gotta fight our way right out of this, and like grow the user base, and that's so much fun because it's really growing the market for everybody, right? It's not zero sum in any way.
Yep, agreed. So for us, okay, it's a very interesting question, right? Because I mean, TVL is interesting. TVL is important, right? It's both the most useless metric in the world, right? But also the most. I'm sorry, it is totally useless, right? And everyone knows it's totally useless. I'm sorry to say that. But I think it's important because it signifies trust, right? Okay, I think the TVL is important because it's a metric for trust, right? How many people trust you to put their money in you, right? And I think that is why I think there are two sides of me, right? One side that says that TVL is a random bullshit metric that you should completely ignore, right? The other, but the other one, the other side of me understands that TVL is an important metric for trust, right? And trust is everything in crypto, right? And I think so. I think and also the other thing is that DeFi is so early now in Solana, right? We literally don't have a good landing platform that's made on mainnet yet, right? But we think that when it picks up, I think we need the liquidity to be there, right? But for now, I think it will be TVL. And but not crazy, right? We don't intend to just grow it blindly, right? But then I think but having the number be high enough such that people trust Mercurial as a platform to put your assets, I think that's a very important thing to do. But at the same time, again, it's very, very easy to get caught up in that game, right? So I think the question for us is how do we balance between the fundamentals of where the ecosystem is right now, right? And the need to kind of build up liquidity to be ready for that, and also to build up trust. That's one thing. And the second thing that's actually related to what Anatoly is saying, right, is that our second main metric is not number related, right? But it's around what can we build, right? Right? So I think over here is where we are we are actually developing a lot of new systems internally. But I mean, and also we are also hitting on two interesting constraints, which is the transaction size limit and the compute unit limit, right? So yeah, I think so. At the risk of being digressing, hey Anatoly, what do you think of those? Because those two things are pretty big bottlenecks for us. The transaction size limit. I know there are a lot of ways to get around it, but we are finding it hard.
There's everyone's working on it. So like a couple changes coming out is one is the ability for you to specify in the transaction that you need more. Like I need more compute, I need more memory, right? Like that. So that's coming online pretty soon. And the other part is this format, transaction v2 format, that allows you to kind of like basically compress a bunch of the public keys that you're using. So you could reference, like hundreds now of accounts in a transaction. So that would like, we need the resource, we need the deterministic request for resources before V2 is online, because if we have that, if we don't have it, people are just gonna like spam the fuck out of the network with the hundreds of accounts, right? Give the
I know a little bit of tools. Yeah, I know what I mean. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys saw Neon. So they built something that is it's a smart contract that implements the Ethereum virtual machine that interprets the EVM bytecode. It runs just like any other smart contract. There's nothing special about it. What's cool about it is that this took blood, sweat, and tears on their side. But basically, when you start an Ethereum transaction, it starts a computation that incrementally continues. So it can span multiple Solana blocks until it finishes. So there's effectively a way for you to like do these very long kind of UX-y things, like in this kind of higher level scripting language almost, which kind of makes sense, right? You have the lower level where you're run your matching engine, like you're like not like the really close to the metal, like high performance stuff. But then maybe like there's a big pile of user interfacing stuff, like events that you want to fire and coordinate, and you do that at this higher level VM. So it's kind of interesting how that design turned out, and I'm pretty excited about it because I think that approach is scalable to JavaScript, to Python, to whatever.
But right now, if someone builds something on Neon, right? Does it interop with the rest of the Solana stack?
It's EVM. It's just a smart contract.
Yep.
Like it's not in a separate stack. It is literally like a smart contract on Solana, runs at the same layer as Serum, at the same layer as any of the Rust contracts. It's going to be more expensive because an ERC20 transfer is like 50,000 BPF instructions because Ethereum is a very large, heavy virtual machine that does a lot of stuff, right? Like while like a native transfer is like 200. So that difference is always going to be there. So if what you're doing is like running an Oracle that's submitting data every block every 400 milliseconds, you wouldn't want to use that at all, right? Because that's going to be too much overhead. Even like risk engines, liquidations, AMMs, trading, I would stick to native code for the most part, I would imagine. But there's like other primitives that are maybe like more interesting that you could run there. Obviously, like a lot of folks that just want to launch the same stuff that runs in Ethereum could now run in that sandbox as well.
Is that EVM code compatible code like already live? Like, so can people kind of copy pasta a code
more
from?
resources definitely coming. So that's what a lot of folks are working on that.
Because once that EVM code is live, then I can sort of see a lot of people bridging, like, oh, we copy pasta this like all these EVM apps on Ethereum, Polygon,
We'll
BSC
see.
here to Solana, I suppose.
We'll see if that actually happens. You know,
Yes.
like, because I think we like our users and like the culture that we've built is quite different than what like we see on a lot of other chains. And I
Cool. Okay, guys, I think we're kind of running up on time, so we have roughly 1 minute each. So maybe 3 minutes left, so 1 minute each on if there's any final thoughts that you guys want to say on what's next, what's the hope or plans or for Solana in the next few years, I suppose, next few months, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, go for it.
you know, for us, man, it's exactly what Ming said. Like, we gotta like unblock devs and like give them the tools to get shit done. So
Thank you.
that's the number one priority. And
Thank
like
you.
some of the cool things that people are working on is validating that the network can handle 1 billion accounts in like 64 gigs of RAM. So that kind of thing. Like, we're really stress testing the edges. Like, what happens if we do start onboarding 100 million users? Like, so like validating that stability. So I want to, like, 2 months say, hey, look, there's this validator, 64 gigabytes of RAM. We can handle 1 billion accounts on the network. Bring it on, world, right? Like that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm excited to see. So stuff like that, and really like, we need like to add some hooks to like reduce fees. Like, we had this year ago, we hard coded the fee structure to be like basically X amount of LAN ports. But hardware has gotten so much better that actually capacity has gone up and the price of the token has gone up beyond our wildest dreams. So now we can actually start reducing fees, and I'm excited about that. Like, I want Solana, the story of this network, to be that every 2 years there's at least a 50% drop in costs for all the users. And how awesome is that? So
Kind of like
yeah,
AWS, everything goes cheaper by the year, right?
that's how it should be. It's just hardware, right? It's just organized sand.
Organized sand, I like that. I think for us, just quickly wrapping up, like, I think it's about building valuable products which people want and that they see are useful things. So, for us, we want to be that place that people are, keeping their tab open every day. But while they're there, they need to be doing useful stuff. And for us, that's sort of expanding our coverage to the rest of Solana. It's building some new products, vaults and so on, and assisting people with doing what they're already doing. So maybe risk management stuff as well. Just sort of building out on our core value proposition there. So yeah, I mean, it's just build stuff people want and help people do what they're already doing better.
Yeah, and just real quick is that I mean, our goal has always been the same, right? Which is how do we build the best liquidity systems, right? And we plan to do a number of things like dynamic fees, right? Dynamic capital allocation, right? Composability across several things, many different platforms. Yeah, and then so really excited about building all of that, and really impressed by how the Solana team is thinking about how do we maintain the long-term scalability of the system, right? But at the same time unblock that right now, right? I think and lastly is that I think what Anatoly said earlier about thinking about the EVM not as a copy pasta mechanism, right, but as an abstracted scripting mechanism, right? That we are incredibly excited about, right? And right now we work at the raw code, Rust code, right? But we are also excited about figuring out how do we how do we kind of like be part of abstracting the system as well. Yeah, so I think and hoping we can contribute a bit there as well. So I think all in all, I think for us it's about creating innovative liquidity systems. it's about like obviously adding value to LPs and users and everything, and also being part of the Solana ecosystem, right? You know, and helping to figure out how do we build better design patterns, better systems, and how do we work with the team to scale Solana. Yeah, so those things.
Thank you very much, guys, George, Anatoly, and Ming, for writing up everything about the Solana ecosystem today. I think we definitely learned a few new things today about Solana, talking from three of you guys today. So just want to say thank you very much for joining us on the CoinGecko 14 virtual meetup.
Thanks, Bobby.
Yeah, for all of you, for all of you listening in at on Crowdcast and elsewhere, thank you very much for tuning in to the 14 CoinGecko meetup. If you're interested, there's a CoinGecko 5 discount voucher that you can use on store.coingecko.com, and you can kind of get a book. And after this, we have an after party in collaboration with DAO Records. So there will be DJ Savage, Crypto Buffalo, Perpetuate, and Category 5. So feel free to stay on and listen into some of these cool vibes that is in store. So thank you very much once again. I guess that's it, guys. Thanks for showing up on the...
Love the Vipers, man.
I love the
Thank you.
Vipers. That's awesome.
I love
Thanks,
it.
guys.
Bye.